Hey y'all! I have something a little different for you today. Recently, I did a podcast interview, shout out to What's Your Weird Story. And on that podcast, I featured my own personal paranormal stories and unexplained experiences. Well, I can't just share those stories with everybody but y'all, my loyal listener friends. Now, my stories are fairly disjointed, kind of a smattering of odd experiences at random points during my life, so if these stories seem a bit sporadic, it's because they are. So, today is the day that I bring you all of my own stories. I'm Candace, and I'll be your guide. Now, this first story I covered at the end of episode 9, Supernatural Sleepovers. If you listen to that story of the seance in my bedroom, you can check the show notes. I'll give you a timestamp for where you can skip ahead to. Okay, y'all. Everything starts around 1995. I was about 13 years old, hosting a sleepover at my house with 3 other girls. And at the time, The Crow was my favorite movie. A little goth girl wannabe's dream. Brandon Lee, who starred in the movie, had died during filming. There was a terrible accident on set. So I had a poster of Brandon Lee in his role as Eric Draven emblazoned on my bedroom wall. That poster was my pride and joy. Well, we're in the midst of our slumber party, doing whatever it is preteen girls do, when we had the bright idea to hold a seance. Well, since my poster was right there in the middle of the wall, front and center, it was an easy decision to say we were going to summon the spirit of Brandon Lee. So we clasped hands around some candles. We left the overhead light on. Maybe it was just a little too creepy for us to turn it off, but either way, we started asking questions and looking at that poster for a response. Now, we think we can maybe ever so slightly see him nod or shake his head to gesture yes or no to our questions. So we continued asking questions of the poster, the spirit, like this for a little while, watching for that minuscule motion we thought we could maybe, perhaps, possibly see. It was honestly really silly and cringeworthy. Then something happened that spooked us. I don't remember what it was, and I don't recall it being something significant, but something changed the mood in the room from intriguing and fun to this looming fear that raised our hair on end. At that moment, I said, "Give us a sign if we really shouldn't be doing this right now." At that moment, his head shook no so violently that his shoulder-length hair was flying outward from his head in the picture. It was unmistakable. We all screamed and let go of one another's hands, and one of the girls mentioned that we did the worst thing possible. We broke the circle, which supposedly meant that entities might be allowed to stay in our world. Afterward, not really knowing what to do, we just went about our slumber party activities, snacks, movies, talking about boys, whatever we were doing. We didn't mention what had just happened. You know, when I hear stories from people where they experience something unexplained and they refuse to talk about it with others, even if they also experienced it, it has never made a whole lot of sense to me. But remembering this event, maybe it does. It somehow would have felt much more real if we had discussed it after the fact. Now, this, like all the stories that I'll tell you today, I can't explain with the science that I know. I try to examine the mundane before leaping to paranormal conclusions, but short of a mass hallucination, I can't explain this one away. I wonder if this event was the catalyst to the events that would unfold over the next couple of years. Through the mid to late 1990s and my teenage years, there was the occasional unexplained experience. For weeks straight, I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning on the dot and look directly at my clock without any explanation. Occasionally, I would feel the sudden experience that I wasn't alone in the room anymore. I could feel this distinct presence from a certain spot in my bedroom at times. When this happened, something was definitely watching me. After a minute or so, that feeling would dissipate and whatever unseen visitor was present would just leave. A few times my stereo turned itself on in the middle of the night. And when it did this, of course, it liked to be playing a really creepy song every time. This scared me to death. One time I distinctly remember it playing Pink Floyd's The Wall, just in time for the "if you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding" refrain. Another time it was Enter Sandman, so, absolutely terrifying. In 1997, in the early days of the internet and the height of AOL, I had an internet boyfriend from another state that I'd never met. Now, if you're too young to remember those days, this was common. This is what we did. We got on AOL. We met people. Looking back, I hope they were the age that they said they were, but either way, it's just what we did at the time. Now, this online boyfriend was really spiritual, into everything esoteric, and he introduced me to the concept of astral projection. Astral projection is the theory that the spirit can leave the body and travel to different places not only on the planet, but even different dimensions before returning back to the body. So it quickly became our nighttime routine. Are you going to try to come see me tonight, or am I going to go see you? Tee-hee. More silly kid stuff. So we agreed that one night, internet boyfriend would try to astrally project to visit me. I was in my bedroom, upset over some stupid teenage drama I was having with a friend. So I was lying in bed crying. Suddenly, like those times before, I felt a presence standing in the middle of my bedroom. I stared at that spot, my hair standing on end. But then, after a minute, I was enveloped in this really warm, comforting feeling. Somehow, the unsettling feeling of having a supposed spiritual visitor to my room was gone, and I just felt so warm and cozy and content that I managed to close my eyes and just fell right to sleep. The next day, I sign on to AOL with that noisy dial-up connection for him to immediately message me and ask, "Did you see me?" I asked him what he was talking about, and he said, "I did it. I visited you last night. You looked right at me. You were crying, and I didn't understand why. So I wrapped you in my arms and held you until you fell asleep." I tried for years to make this experience make sense. I couldn't explain it, but felt that there had to be something that I wasn't considering, some mundane explanation that could make all of this click into place like puzzle pieces. Finally, in 2020, the Pentagon declassified a lot of what had previously been top secret documents. Now, most people heard about how the government admitted that aliens were real, but in the chaos that was 2020, the news didn't make as big of a splash as it normally would. However, what many missed about those declassified documents is that the Pentagon admitted to the use of astral projection as an investigative tool. Our government admitted to using people who can astrally project to travel into homes, businesses, and even enemy bases, and explaining what they experienced in great detail. These people were then tested And the information relayed was so accurate that they could draw maps of enemy base layouts, give names and code words, and find locations hidden deep in mountainous terrain in enemy territory. Y'all, when I read those reports, those were the puzzle pieces I'd hoped for. Suddenly, the entire experience made sense for exactly what it was and what it seemed to be. That doesn't make it any less spectacular, and it's a memory I'll always treasure of a pretty incredible experience. And no, unfortunately, I never managed to astrally project anywhere. In 2007, I got my nursing license and began working the overnight shift at the local hospital. Working as a nurse gives you an entirely new perspective on life and death. And pretty unsurprisingly, hospitals generally get their fair share of paranormal experiences. Y'all have probably heard a lot of the typical nurse stories about death, like how oftentimes a loved one who's passed on comes to pick them up. I'll spare you from more of those stories as they just tend to make their rounds, so that's nothing really new. The one patient death experience that really stands out for me was a subtle one. I went into the patient's room with another nurse to provide post-mortem care on a patient who'd recently passed away. Now, this involves bathing the body, removing medical equipment like IVs, oxygen tubing, and generally getting them looking as nice as possible for the family and for the funeral home when they arrive. It's really hard to explain this in a way that makes sense. But as we're in there, the room fills with a palpable energy, almost like you could feel the air itself vibrating, every molecule full and lively. It wasn't a heavy feeling hanging in the air, though, more like an energetic one, kind of like the feeling of TV static on your skin. Just as I was taking all this in, the other nurse asks me, "Do you feel that?" We both did. I believe that we felt the essence of that woman leaving her body. It isn't something that I felt every time someone passed, or even most times. But that once, I felt party to something really special. I had been warned by my coworkers at the hospital about the window at the end of the long hallway and the reflection of a woman that tended to appear in it. Sure enough, on a couple of different occasions, I started down that long hallway to go see a patient, and when I glance at the window straight ahead, I see the reflection of a woman standing behind me. Petite and elderly with long white hair, wearing a nightgown with a lightweight robe over the top. She was also staring ahead at the window, or at me. Considering I was looking at her reflection, it's hard to say what she was looking at. It was something that would only happen for a few seconds at a time, and then she just was gone. My favorite ghost story from the hospital, though, is when I was walking down the hallway around 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm looking into every room that has an open door, checking on patients as I went, despite not being assigned to these rooms. The hospital rooms were designed with a set of built-in shelves directly to the left of the doorway into the room. I passed by a room to see a made bed, and in the reflection of the window across from me, I see a late middle-aged man wearing a hospital gown. He has his back to me and is rifling through a duffel bag that is on the shelf next to the room's doorway. I assume he's a newly admitted patient who belonged to another nurse, somebody who came in overnight, hadn't had the chance to get into bed yet, was just trying to get situated. But as I passed by the room, I had a strange feeling about it, and as a nurse, you don't ignore strange feelings. So I turn back and go into the room to check on the man to see if he needs anything or if he's doing okay. And when I walk in, the room's completely empty. Still the same made bed, but no man, no duffel bag. I asked my coworkers if anyone had been admitted late, and nobody had. So I told them what happened, and, everyone was wowed by it, but not surprised. The hospital was riddled with residual hauntings like this. Echoes of people who spent time there replayed like on a record player. Nothing that really interacted with us or caused issues, just memories playing out over and over. The call lights would often go off in empty rooms, and given that it was an old system, that could be attributed to faulty wiring, but when you combine it with all the other goings on, it fits perfectly. The most unusual anomaly we had going on at the hospital, though, was the infamous room 328. For some reason, people just didn't do well in that room. Very old or sick patients had an obvious decline while admitted there. They often required transfer to the ICU or worse. The younger, pretty healthy patients were just in pain, miserable, and ornery while staying in that room. Now, interestingly, do you know what I mean when I tell you if you're in a room with a tight closing door, you can feel the air pressure change when someone opens the door? I experienced that sensation every time I was in that room without fail, but the door had not opened. Now, one patient in particular spent a few years bouncing in and out of that room when he was doing too poorly for the nursing home. He was known to be a cruel man who physically abused his wife until a stroke paralyzed him on one side, so he was unable to beat her anymore. Then he just chose to verbally assault her whenever she would still come visit him on occasion for some reason. When that man finally passed away, although he wasn't at the hospital when it happened, things began improving in room 328. While the strange shift in air pressure thing still happened, the atmosphere felt lighter and patients didn't seem to experience the same poor prognosis and general discontent. Who knows if this was the cause of what could be phrased as negative energy, bad vibes, or something more paranormal, but either way, this happened so often that room became notorious. And sometimes employees would request that any family members not be admitted into that room if they were to get sick. Now, early on into that hospital career, in 2008, I took a long weekend off work to go to a small paranormal conference in Louisville, Kentucky. The highlight of this conference, aside from meeting notable paranormal researchers and professionals, was getting to spend 2 nights in Waverly Hills Sanitarium. Now, if you're a paranormal junkie, you've undoubtedly heard of it, as it's on many ghosty bucket lists out there. So hopefully I don't disappoint you too much when I tell you I'm going to save that objective paranormal data I can recall from that trip for an obligatory Waverly Hills episode. But there is one story that's more subjective that has stuck with me, and I'd like to share it. So while at Waverly, we got to tour with some notable paranormal folks. Patrick Burns, the Constantinos before that unfortunate incident, Chip Coffey, and the demonologist John Zaffis. Now, I have no idea what kind of education you get to become a demonologist, but either way, he was a really cool and unexpectedly goofy guy. So my husband at the time and I were sitting in the cafeteria area at Waverly. We're sitting in the dark, it's pitch black, and we're in the only 2 chairs in this big room when 2 guys wander in. Now, there were a lot of people on this overnight investigation, so 2 people coming in to join us was really not unexpected. But something about these guys was really unsettling. Something I couldn't put my finger on. I leaned over and told my then husband, I don't like these guys for some reason. I get a really bad feeling about them. Eventually, we wandered out of the cafeteria, back to where a big group was gathering in the hallway. And just as the two guys walked up, following us, demonologist John Zaffis says, "Hey, where's your friend?" to them. They act confused and say that it's just them. John stresses to them that no, it has never just been the two of them. He tells them there has been a third guy, a guy in black following the two of you around all night until now. I have no idea if there was anything to that, but it gives me chills just remembering, because something about those two guys was so unnerving that his words rattled my bones. Of course, it doesn't help that it's the freaking demonologist who said all of this. Like I said, a Waverly Hills episode will happen, but that's my favorite story from that trip. A few months following the Waverly Hills trip, so we're still in 2008 here, I'm asleep in my bedroom one day after working the previous night. I had a queen-size bed that was against the wall of my bedroom, with a nightstand on the one side. I'd been sleeping in the middle of this queen-size bed, facing the wall, with my back to the nightstand. I woke up suddenly to hear a loud clatter in the room, to find that my Nintendo DS was lying in the middle of the bedroom floor. It had been on the middle of my nightstand when I fell asleep, and my positioning in the bed would have prevented me from accidentally knocking it off or even reaching it from where I was. Not to mention, it wasn't lying at the bottom of the nightstand that it fell from. It was a good 5 feet from the nightstand. I have no idea how it went flying, and nothing unusual happened for a long time after that. Shortly after that experience, I moved into a couple of apartments, and nothing happened in those. Finally, we're here in present time. At the home I'm in now, I've had a couple of strange occurrences that I cannot definitively say are paranormal, but are definitely weird. Last year, I lost someone very important to me. Now, I'm going to be purposefully vague here to protect privacy, so bear with me. This person spent time at the home I'm living in and considered it a very special place to them. Before passing, a couple of times they told me they wish they could just come sit on my back porch. On 3 separate occurrences in the month after this person's passing, I've seen them sitting on the couch on my back porch from the corner of my eye. Unmoving, like a still frame, like a photograph. If I turned my head to look directly at them, they were gone. It was something I only ever saw from the corner of my eye, still as a statue looking out at the view. It was never a disconcerting presence, but a reassuring one, that they got that time they wanted to sit on my back porch. Okay, finally, this one feels a little silly. It's honestly a little embarrassing, but why not if we've made it this far? I was sleeping very poorly one night. The house settling noises seemed to be vastly increased, with pops and creaks constantly, unlike normal. And all night, I dreamt, for some reason, that there were spirits in my bathroom, of all places. This is in the bathroom attached to my bedroom. These dreams went on all night long, with me dreading waking up the next day, finding a way to deal with these bathroom spirits. And it's kind of funny because I haven't had any issues like that with my bathroom or inside this house at all. So when I wake up the following day, I brushed it off as having a really crappy night of sleep and just weird dreams, right? So that next night, as I got into bed, my bed is angled, so I'm looking directly into the open bathroom. And as I get into bed, see the bathroom, I recall those dreams and the relief that I felt that there are not really spirits in my bathroom. And at that moment, the cat litter in the litter box shifted like a cat was stepping onto it. I didn't think much of it until my 2 cats both stood up on the bed and stared intently at the litter box. So that gave me chills. It was a little creepy. I did have a cat who passed away really shortly after moving into this house. And sometimes I feel a cat jump onto my bed, walk, and then find a good spot and lay down. But neither of my cats are there. So maybe the litter box was related to that? I don't know. It feels like such a small story in the grand scheme of the others, but the recency helps the details stand out more. And if nothing else, this podcast episode helps me preserve all of these memories that I don't want to forget. Well, y'all, that's it for my personal paranormal stories. I guess let's talk about it, because that's what we do, even though I just did. Well, I've told these stories to people close to me, in bits and pieces throughout the years. Telling them all at once in quick succession like this is so exposing. It feels pretty naked to put experiences out there. I think that part of it is knowing that inevitably there will be some people who don't believe me. And some of them do sound implausible, I know. Trust me. And all I can say is that these stories did happen exactly as I've told you. While my feelings behind these stories vary, I'm grateful to have had these experiences. They've helped to open my cynical mind to things that otherwise would be overlooked. Sometimes I think that we get so wrapped up in life and our insignificant problems that we lose touch with our intuition and our sensitivity, I guess, to experiences that may be just outside the realm of our everyday. Either way, as always, I want to know what you think. Do you have a favorite story from today? Personally, my favorites are the Brandon Lee seance, which, no, don't make me tell you I don't think I encountered the spirit of Brandon Lee, but something was there interacting with us either way. That and the astral projection stories are my favorite. Those are the two that blow me away still. Anyhow, have you had an experience similar to any of these stories? Tell me. I love hearing from y'all. You can find me on social media at Obscure Appalachia or email me at obscureappalachia@gmail.com. If you missed the announcement, the show's Patreon is launching tomorrow. So if you'd like to support the show and get extra content, check out the show notes for that link. Please leave a review for the pod if you haven't already. Thanks, y'all. Until next time.